All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start. And so last week, I'm going to go ahead and start. So last week, we had a very interesting session where we looked at the lot of spirit, right? And we talked about how the lot of spirit was the lot of the future, the lot of the hidden, etc. Also, we talked about the fact that this particular lot hadn't probably really been used at all since the 13th or 14th century. And so this got me to thinking about some of these other lots. I mean, there's 97 of them or something. There's lots for every, there's many lots for each house. And when we've looked at the houses, we've looked at the lots in connection to the houses, and we found them to be quite efficacious. But the ones that I've never actually looked at, there's some that I want to look at today that I've never actually looked at. And I personally got so much out of 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we looked at the lot of spirit and we kind of dissected its worth, its how it was showing up and whether it was actually worth looking at. And in my opinion, it was really kind of worth looking at, but it was really something murkier than we were used to looking at. I thought then there are these lots that are connected to the planets. And I thought it might be interesting to look at some of those, so to kind of go into what these particular lots are supposed to be. And the lot of Eros, which is the title of this particular section, or this particular video, is the lot of Venus. Eros, of course, is like a principle. Eros is the Greek word for Cupid, but Eros is also a larger principle of kind of the promotion of life through pleasure. And so Venus, it's connected to Venus. And I thought, oh, that would be a fun, interesting thing to maybe look at. And then I thought, oh, well, each of these planets has a lot that's connected to it. And so my question when I'm looking at this is, now, is it something that is supporting the actual manifestation of the planet in the natal chart, right? So is this person's lot of Venus specific to their Venus? And of course, obviously, I guess, duh, right? However, let's look at what the actual, look at the actual formula, right? Because all of these lots are about distances between significators, right? So this particular lot, welcome, Stephanie. This particular lot is taken, the two significators for this lot are the lot of fortune, the part of fortune, and the part of spirit. So it's a Venus lot, but it's not Venus to something or other, Venus to the ascendant or Venus to the seventh. There actually is a part of marriage that's taking the distance between Venus and the seventh house. And, so that makes a lot of sense because she's the lady of marriage. But with this particular one, what we're looking at is the lot of fortune, which we know is to represent all of the person, or all of the kind of external person, and then the lot of fortune, or the lot of spirit, or the lot of future, or the lot of the hidden, which is to represent all of that which we don't see about the person and what is going to happen to them, which is what we kind of got from the lot of spirit concept 3 weeks ago. So on some level, this is about uniting the two halves, right? Uniting the sun and the moon in this, bringing them together. So there's kind of this idea of cosmic marriage connected. And this must be maybe what they were thinking of, because we've already understood that the part of fortune is called the ascendant of the moon. And the lot of spirit is called the lot of the sun. We can see it right here, the lot of spirit or the sun. Thus, sun and moon, we've already talked about in our older videos that they are one pair, right? That they are one unit, a masculine and feminine unit put together. And the fact that shows that is that the sun only owns one sign, which is masculine, and the moon only owns one sign, which is feminine, right? All of the other wandering stars, they own one of each. Thus, it looks like this is the union between the masculine and feminine, or the two lights, or the cosmic marriage, etc. And that's why the lot of Eros is taken by day from the lot of fortune to the lot of spirit, right? Look, it's even calling it the lot of non-appearance, and then projected from the ascendant. So once more, if we were to use a chart as kind of an example of what we're looking at, what we're talking about, last week, I keep saying last week, but of course it was 3 weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago, when we were working with this, I had a person who knew almost nothing. And so we were talking about how zodiac signs can represent things, planets can represent things, but then also distances can represent things, right? So for instance, and we used Saturn and the sun as our example because they're both significators for father. And so the principle of a part or lot is that you find the distance between the two significators that represent the same thing or represent different aspects of the same thing. And then you project that particular distance from the house of life, which of course is specific to the person and specific to the chart. Now, of course, you can use lots in horary, you can use lots in electional, you can use lots in mundane astrology, but everything is always starting from the ascendant. Now, there are some parts that are projected from the ninth house. The lot of long distance travel is projected from the ninth. The part of substance is the distance between the ruler of the second and the second cusp, right? So, and the part of death is projected from Saturn. So it's not always from the ascendant. It depends on what we're talking about. It makes a lot of sense that the part of death would be projected from Saturn because he's the natural significator of death. So they didn't do it from the eighth house, which is the house of death. They did it from Saturn. So what we would be looking at in this particular chart is we would be looking for the distance between the part of fortune, and we're going to find the part of spirit. And then we realize that the sun is under the horizon, and so this is a night chart. So this is the chart of a porn actor, and this is, we're going to look at for the lot of Eros in this chart. So I think that this is a good place to start, right? The lot of Eros, excuse me, should be somewhat prominent in the chart of someone who has done sex work and whose kind of life work is around sexual pleasure. And of course, Venus is the ruler of sexual pleasure and coitus and all of that stuff. And she's also one of the significators for fertility in children, and represents semen. So I think that's a good place to start. So we already see that 20 degrees of Sagittarius is the part of fortune. Let's find the part of spirit. So the part of fortune and the part of spirit are found by looking for the distance between the sun and the moon. So by day, we would start from the sun's position and look for the moon's position. And then by night, we would start from the moon's position and then look for the sun's position. And whatever distance that we have, we would then project that distance from the ascendant. So the part of fortune, we're going to just start from the part of fortune here. So it's a nighttime chart. So we would start from the moon's position to the sun's position. We see here that the moon is at 1 degree of Scorpio. So we know that 1 degree of Taurus, she's in 1 degree of Taurus, sorry. So we know that 1 degree of Scorpio would be 180 degrees. If we go back 30 degrees, we know that 1 degree of Libra would be 150 degrees. So the distance between the moon and the sun is 150 plus 12, right? 1 plus 12 equals 13. So we're going to now project 150 degrees plus 12 from this ascendant. So this is 0 to 30. Leo's 30, right? Virgo is 60. Libra is 90. Scorpio is 120. Sagittarius is 150. 8 plus 12 is 20. There we are. That's the part of fortune. 20 degrees of Sagittarius. We've moved 150 plus 12. Now, in order to find the part of spirit, we are going to start from the sun's position and go forward. So once again, if we use the same kind of logic, we know if the sun is at 13 degrees and 45 minutes of Libra, 13 degrees and 45 minutes of Aries is 180 degrees, meaning 13 degrees and 45 minutes of Taurus is 210 degrees. Well, 180 plus 30. So now we would subtract 12, right? Because we have to move backwards to 1 degree of Taurus. So we know that we're going 210 degrees minus 12. So 210 degrees from Cancer is 8 degrees of Aquarius. Let's round it up to the 9th degree, right? 9 degrees of Aquarius, but we have to move backwards 12. So that means we're going to move back into Capricorn. 9 degrees to 0 is 9 degrees is 9 degrees to 0, right? And then back another 3 would bring us to 20, or back another 2, 28 degrees of Capricorn. So it brings us into the 28th degree of Capricorn. So we'll just use this for right now, 28th degree of Capricorn for the spirit. So we've got a fortune at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. We have a spirit at 29 degrees or 28 degrees of Capricorn. It is nighttime. So we now find the distance starting from the spirit to the fortune, right? So if we go from fortune to spirit, that would be the daytime. We're doing the nighttime, spirit to fortune, which means we go back 30 degrees and back another 8, right? Back 30 degrees and back another 8. We're just going to go keep strict with 8. So back 30 brings us to Gemini, and back another 8 degrees of Gemini, or the 9th degree of Gemini, and back another 8 brings us to the 1st degree of Gemini. The 1st degree of Gemini in this is the lot of Eros in this chart. Now, I started with this chart because this chart is the chart of a porn actor. And we talked about that stuff when we looked at the lot of spirit in this chart. We talked about the disparity between the lot of spirit and the porn actor. This is actually not just a porn actor, but the owner of a porn studio. So this is the person who's the head of a studio and also a performer. Thus, Gemini makes some sense, right? Because Mercury is the ruler of business, right? So that's one of the things that he rules he rules money, he rules currency and money, he rules business and buying and selling, he rules administrative duties. So there is an aspect of this owner of the business, so to speak. Now, what kind of business would that be? Or it didn't have to be business. It could be just good old general communication, gossip, getting to know each other. It's in the 12th house, so it would be in something that doesn't see the light of day, and it could be something that also brings self-undoing. This could be also something that the Eros could also be a trigger for self-undoing in this chart, because Gemini is the 12th place or the 12th house, right? And so this is very close to the cusp of the 12th, but it's 100% in the whole sign 12th. And I know a little bit about this actor because I have a questionnaire that I've used with him, and not necessarily going into porn, but expressing his life as a sexual person did bring him into contact with drugs and did bring him into contact with drug abuse and substance abuse problems. So we can see that the 12th house is showing up based on the cursory stuff that I do know. However, as I thought, it should have brought us to here. It would either have brought us to here, the moon in Taurus, or to here, the Venus, all of this cluster that's in Libra. This cluster from Pluto, actually we could even say from the sun to Mercury, in traditional or Islamic medieval verbiage, this would not be considered a stellium, it would be called an assembly. And it would really be between 13 and 28, because it should be within 15 degrees. This is just a little bit, the Mercury is just a little bit outside of what would be called the assembly. So really this the sun, Pluto, Venus is really inside the assembly, and the Mercury is just on the outside of it. And note that it's last 5 minutes of the sign, but it still is in the same sign with Venus. It's within 5 degrees, which a lot of people like to use for aspects. Of course, I use the aspects of the planets themselves. And so we know that both Venus and Mercury have 3.5 degrees of moiety. So they have 7 degrees before they're out of each other's influence. And so they are still within each other's influence, even though Mercury is separating from the conjunction of Venus. So all of that stuff, this definitely tracks as far as what I would expect. And in some level, this tracks, maybe it tracks more than the spirit did. Actually, when we saw the spirit and it pointed to the Saturn in Virgo, we thought, that's really different from just being a porn actor. You know, that's really about seeing what's wrong and fixing it, right? And so we saw that, that's probably why the person wasn't satisfied with just performing, or saw themselves as a problem solver, or as the person in charge of the actual vision, right? In charge of executing the vision. But the vision is all to the promotion of Venus, right? All to her promotion. And of course, Taurus, we already talked about the ruler of the ascendant being in a licentious sign of Taurus, which of course is ruled by Venus, and both aspects of soul, moon and Mercury, being owned essentially by Venus. And that Venus, of course, that would make her kind of the sole significator of the soul in this chart. And this person has the name of his studio is Dark Alley. And I think this Pluto here with the Venus shows that quite well. And someone else thought that it was the Saturn in Virgo, the Capricorn spirit, because of course Saturn himself represents darkness. So this is already kind of tracking for Owen Hawk, especially with how the behavior can bring about downfall, personal downfall. This is the chart of Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Zsa Zsa Gabor was married 9 times. I think she was married 10 times, but twice to the same person. So 10 marriages, but 9 husbands. Almost all of them very, very wealthy. Some of them, she was married to Conrad Hilton before Elizabeth Taylor got him. She was married to various nobility personages. Matter of fact, her last husband was kind of a deposed prince of sorts. She, in the later part of her life, she was one of the wealthy people who was ripped off by Bernie Madoff. And I think I've got Bernie Madoff's chart here as well, because there's a part of Thieves that I thought we might want to look at and we could use with his chart. So we're starting, notice that the part of fortune is in the 7th house. Makes a lot of sense, right? For somebody for whom marriage was a major defining factor of their life. Yes. And then, so the reason I've been talking about this kind of soul stuff is that we've been looking at, on Thursday on Clubhouse, we were revisiting whether or not we thought the nodes pointed to soul purpose or to destiny and soul purpose, or whether the technique from the medieval period of the 3 powers of the soul pointed to it more overtly. And we were finding generally that the 3 powers of the soul did point to these things more overtly. However, let's see what's going on with fortune, spirit, and Eros. Let's see what the Eros might say. So it makes plenty of good sense that a fertile sign, Pisces, is on the cusp of the 7th. Fertile signs usually give you more than 1. And so let's now look and see what the part of spirit is. So sun to moon, right? Oh, this is a full moon chart. So we know that both the part of spirit and the part of fortune are going to be hovering around the cusp of the 7th house. Conversely, with a new moon chart, then the part of fortune and the part of spirit will be hugging the ascendant. So there's 4 degrees of difference here. The moon to the sun, because it's nighttime, we start from that, would give us 180 plus 4, or 100, yep, which is tracking a 3 something, right? 24 plus 180 plus 4 is 28 of Pisces. So then we would subtract that 4. So we'll round it up to 25. We'll subtract that 4. So 21 Pisces. 21 Pisces is what we're looking at. So 21 Pisces, 28 Pisces. 28 Pisces is the part of fortune. 21 Pisces is the part of spirit, or 29 Pisces. Let's just round both of them up. So that gives us 8 degrees. It's nighttime, so we're going to go from fortune to spirit. So we're going to go forward 9 degrees. From 25 forward 9 degrees is 4 degrees of Libra. Makes sense, right? Makes sense in a few different ways. One, makes sense in a lot of different ways as far as this is. And this is interesting. Like I said, I've never looked at these. I've really never looked at this. I've never looked at these, at charts with these. And we're just going to start with Venus, and then we're going to move on to some of the other ones. One of the funny things that Zsa Zsa Gabor said was, I love to be a housewife. Every time I get a divorce, I always get the house. So that's reeks of the 4th house, right? Because 4th house is houses, but it also reeks of a certain type of venality. Venality. And there are words that come from Venus, like venerate. We venerate the cross, we say on Good Friday when we crawl, or is it on Maundy Thursday? When we crawl up to the cross, we sing, we venerate the cross. When we are venal, we put a lot of value. We love it so much and we value it so much that we covet it, right? So venal is the negative aspect of Venus. And venality is the 2nd house aspect of Venus. Because when we're venal for substance. We're venal for material. We are materialists, right? We are about acquisition. And that's basically, and 2nd house is the house of our acquisition. That's basically what she says. She said, I acquire every time a marriage ends. She just was specific about what we acquire. I acquire when the marriage ends. I acquire a house. A house is a big ticket item. Right? It's ruled by the 4th, but it's also her substance. It becomes her property, her thing. It's what she owns, which is the 2nd house. So we've got the part of Eros in the 2nd house. We've got, which would give us settlements, right? Our money would be affected. Our Eros, when we open our legs, we open our checkbook to receive to receive money also, maybe, right? Or when we open our wedding vows, when we lift the veil, right? If we don't want to be quite so vulgar, when we lift the veil for that wedding kiss, we also open a securities account that husband is going to be depositing in. And note that the part of Eros, the ruler of the part of Eros, which is Venus, is in conjunction with the ruler of the ascendant, Mercury. Note this is the 2nd chart we have where Mercury and Venus are in conjunction. This time it's an applying aspect. Why? Because Mercury is faster and Mercury is in a lower degree of the sign. He's at 22 and she's at 27. When he's at 29, like we had with Owen Hawke's chart, then he will be separating from her because he would be at a higher. So this is the next thing happening in this chart. The next thing kind of happening for the ruler of the ascendant is she's moving to Venus, who's the natural ruler of love, Venus, who's the natural ruler of beauty. This woman was Miss Hungary, 1940. Venus, who's the natural ruler of singing and dancing and music and art. This woman was an actress and a dancer and a singer. This thing is moving to Venus, who is the lady of marriage. We've already talked about this woman was married 10 times. You see, so this is tracking all the way so far. And it's tracking, it's interesting. It's tracking kind of in a metaphysical way. Do you have a question, Stephanie? Oh, sorry. I
Nope,
thought I
not
heard.
yet.
Okay, good. I thought I heard you. I thought I heard you going, oh, I've got some of this. But so it's tracking. I love it when these things kind of start to track. Now, of course, we've only looked at 2 charts, but I was expecting this. What I was expecting was for this to track in a purely kind of physical way, like what the person likes to do when they have sex. And it looks like it's tracking. Actually, let's go back to what the description of it is and see how it's supposed to be tracking. Appetite and companionship is what he's calling it, is found in this way. The degrees being taken from the lot of fortune to the lot of non-appearance, the degrees of the first degree of the rising sun up to the horoscope will be added, blah, blah, blah. All right, so what does it mean? And this signifies pleasure and passionate desire in sexual intercourse, and cherishing and the seeking of those things which the mind desired, and in which it rejoices and is strengthened. Also, love and all matters of sexual intercourse and marriage unions and concord and happiness and games and delight. So this is all the things that are Venus, right? This is all the things. This is trying to signify everything that Venus, the planet herself, signifies. But there's a way that, but it obviously becomes particularized in the same way that the Venus in our natal chart is particularized, right? Venus represents these things: pleasure, passionate desire in sexual intercourse, cherishing and the seeking of those things which the mind desired and in which it rejoices and is strengthened, love in matters of sexual intercourse. All of those things are Venus, including beauty and beauty and and entertainment and all of those, and music and the arts, right? But if we have a Venus in Scorpio squaring Saturn, then maybe, and retrograde, then maybe we don't have access to that aspect of her as easily, right? That would be our specific Venus. Yes, she rules all those things. But at the same time, there's our specific Venus and how she's working. But with this, there is an agent of Venus who we're working with. In Owen Hawke's chart, the agent of Venus was Mercury. And Mercury was giving 12th house, right? Because that's where the actual lot was. He's also giving 3rd or 4th house, or when you're whatever, in the cusp of this, it's 4th, but we know it's the whole sign 3rd. So he's also giving 3rd, 4th in this chart. So that's a way that, once again, once again have an agent. This Mercury is working as an agent for the Eros and helping to bring it about. And of course, Mercury likes to bring things about by either organizing, communicating, reading, or writing, right? He's not just specifically, he's the intellect, he's the conscious mind. So by using our mind, using our brain, so this person, it might not, I mean, sure, they may love the sex and love all the pleasure, but that might not necessarily be where the Eros of the Venus is. So this is, this is me speculating / spitballing. The Eros of the Venus is Mercury, not Venus, or not just Venus. Right, so this might be where we can see the wife beater. If the Eros of the Venus is Mars, or Mars Pluto, or something, kind of not, or Mars opposed Saturn or something, then we could maybe see that could be problematic. Right now, what we're seeing is a lot of support for the Venusian. Right, the Mercury here is in Libra, rather. Sorry. In the Zsa Zsa Gabor chart, Venus is her own agent, and she's working on the Mercury, who's the ruler of the ascendant in the chart. And note that she's applying to the square of the Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter are both rulers of Pisces based on domicile and exaltation. They are the rulers of Pisces. Venus is sextiling the part of fortune, and she's applying to the square of Jupiter. More importantly, she is pushing fall onto Jupiter, And Jupiter is pushing detriment back at her. So this is why the marriages don't work. There's a problem in the Eros already. The ruler of the seventh, when we're looking already for marriage, we're looking at the Venus and the ruler of the seventh. Those are the main things we look at. In this particular case, Venus and the ruler of the seventh are in square. Venus and the ruler of the seventh, which means that the ruler of the seventh and the ruler of the Eros are also in square. So this might be a person who actually couldn't really love. When we were looking at the spirit and the fortune together, we noticed like that the moon was the ruler of Jupiter was the ruler of both in this chart. And thus we had the Mars coming to the Jupiter, we had the Venus squaring it. So this really points, everything really kind of points to this misuse or this karmic challenge around love and marriage, Eros, being able to give love, being able to give and receive love, and then aside from wealth, because obviously that's what this chart can get. This chart can get wealth. Note that the ruler of the eighth is applying to Jupiter, the ruler of the seventh. That's his money. So we've got Jupiter already enlarging the money that the lover has. And then is there a connection between Mars and Venus? Not necessarily, except that Mars is the ruler of the exaltation ruler of the Venus, right? But then Venus is also applying to the planet in the eighth, which is the money of the spouse. And Venus is the ruler of the second. So we've got the ruler of the second. Here's the other thing. The Eros is thus connected to the second house, to the second and the ninth. The Eros is connected to the second house in this chart, just like the Eros was connected to the third and the 12th in Owen Hawk's chart, or the fourth and the 12th. So the hidden, things that are hidden. The third and the 12th, the brotherhood that brings me down, that can bring me down, right? So this is very fascinating and worth looking further into. Oh, last but not least, this is Warren Beatty. Warren Beatty was known as a womanizer, was known as a Hollywood womanizer in the 60s and 70s. Gorgeous man. Beautiful, like really one of the most beautiful Hollywood actors, especially in the 60s. In the 70s, he was kind of known, went into his kind of rugged, kind of macho rugged period, but still fucking gorgeous. And super charismatic, super into the ladies. We can see that with the Venus on the part of fortune here, right? And the Uranus, so the Venus Uranus never satisfied, can't settle down. Right, he ended up settling down with a woman, 30 years younger than he, which is usually the case, excuse me, in Hollywood. That's what Johnny Depp is dealing with right now, the woman's about almost 30 years younger. Let's see, so we're looking for Eros. We're looking to see if this womanizer can be seen in the Eros, right? Look at how the Saturn's on the cusp of the seventh, another Pisces cusp. And another 27, 28 degrees. That's almost the exact degree that we had with Zsa Zsa. Maybe that's a cursed degree. Now, interesting, the 27th degree of Pisces is the exaltation degree of Venus. But the 27th degree is between 2601 and 2700. Warren Beatty was born in the same place as my grandmother and grandfather and mother. They were all born in Richmond, Virginia. I'm assuming that means that Shirley MacLaine was also born there, because Shirley MacLaine is Warren Beatty's sister. Okay, so let's get into it. We know that the fortune, that would mean, okay, so we know that the fortune is in Taurus, which means that there's 210 degrees between the moon and sun. It's a daytime chart, so that means sun to moon, there's 210 degrees, 210 plus 14. 210, let's see, would bring us to 29 degrees of Aries, plus 14 would bring us to the 13th degree of Taurus, which is exactly where we are, 13th degree of Taurus. Perfect. Okay, so that means moon to sun is 150 degrees. So 150 degrees minus 14, right? So 150 degrees brings us to 29 degrees of Aquarius, minus 14 brings us to 15 degrees of Aquarius. 15 degrees of Aquarius. Note that that brings the ruler of the spirit to the 7th house cusp. One of the things that I've noticed more and more strongly is that the 5th house does not represent romances. It represents pleasure. It represents the things that we take pleasure in. It is the joy of Venus, and she takes pleasure in sexual activity. She also takes pleasure in, it's whatever she takes pleasure in, right? Based on her zodiacal condition. So she can take pleasure in anything. They say in the kink community, especially in existential kink, anybody can get off on any kind of stroke, right? Any kind of stroke can get you off. You know, like some people can get off on hard strokes and being paddled and, you know, and lashed. Some people get off only on the softest caressing strokes, right? But the 5th house is what kind of stroke gets you off. It isn't necessarily the difference between your married partner and your romances. Now, that's my belief based on what I've seen and worked with. Of course, the 5th house is the house of children. So it's the fruit of the pleasure. It's what happens after the pleasure. So that's another respect in which I think the 5th house cannot really be used for romances or for sex. Believe it or not, in the medieval period, the 7th house was given it all for sex. What gives you pleasure, your sensual pleasures are in the 5th, so that would kind of show also. But the 7th house was where they looked for your sexual proclivity. Venus, obviously, and the 7th house. So now we can see the Eros of this Venus. So notice I'm using that term, the Eros of the blah, 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 because the Eros is this thing that promotes life. Eros promotes life through the pursuit of passion and pleasure. As a matter of fact, in kind of Western Tantra, they talk about the difference between Eros, promoting Eros, and what do they call it? Releasing tension. Right, so orgasming is a release of tension, but you can use sex instead to continually perpetuate a state of Eros, which is why they often teach in Western Tantrism non-ejaculation. So basically being able to stay hard for a really long time, having sex over extended periods, which then creates some more and more connection. I don't know why I got off into that tangent, but anyway, it's because I'm using the term the Eros of Venus, right? So it's what promotes the usage of the Venus itself. What's the fire, the pilot light under the Venus? Okay, this is me once again speculating. So what do we say? We have 15 Aquarius and 13 Taurus. It is daytime, so we're moving from the fortune of 13 Taurus to 15 Aquarius. So we know Taurus to Aquarius is 270 degrees, and then plus 3, because good old 15 is 3 degrees high, or two degrees. So we're going to go, 2 degrees, huh? All right. So we're going to go to 28 degrees Gemini. That's up 270 degrees from Virgo. And then we're just going to go right into 0 degrees, or the 1st degree of Cancer. And so that would make the moon the ruler of this particular. And it makes sense. Okay, so the moon would be the ruler of this thing. One of the things that we know about, or that we remember about him, was that he was very love him or leave him. He was not at all like the type that would really get involved in romances. He had many affairs, lots of one-night stands, went through women very, very quickly, and very briskly. And so I was just talking about the moon in Scorpio today. I had a reading with a friend where we talked about, I talked about how it was actually moon and Ketu. in Scorpio, and about how this was actually a good thing for her this year, because it meant that she didn't have to give a fuck about anything. She didn't have to attach to anything, and she didn't have to actually show any feeling. And she was dealing with issues that were making her react. And this moon in Scorpio, right? That's the fall of the moon. So she's not going to be at her most empathetic. She's not going to be at her most compassionate. She's not going to be at her most caring. And then with K2 as well, K2 is all about what I detach from. So I was like, girl, detach, don't give a fuck. And that's basically what she needed. So this is not what I would exhort this particular chart to do, because they're already there. This person, more than likely, we can see with the Saturn on the cusp of the 7th, and we saw that with Johnny Depp. That's a hard taskmaster for others. That's someone who can put others through difficulty, right? We also see the things of, attracting an older maid or having an age disparity in the marriage, and certainly he does. But also that can be a stern person to others, a person who shows their sternness or their brusqueness. And remember, Saturn is also distance and renunciation, right? So this is a person who might not have been interested in marriage at all until, wasn't it what Melanie Griffith that ended up marrying? Either Annette Bening or Melanie Griffith, one of those two. And she was like 23 or something, and he is 54. But and that, I think it was his first marriage. He was with Julie Christie for years in the 70s, but he wouldn't marry her, and there was all that shit between them, and the affairs and all that bullshit. So I think, and also don't forget that Scorpio rules the genitals. So this could have been a person who was very, so this is an example I'm giving of that. So look at how the moon is also applying to the trine of the Saturn, and who's right on the cusp of the 7th. So this is somebody who might not have who liked sex but didn't like women very much, right? Loved beauty, but didn't really like the people themselves. Look at the Jupiter in Capricorn too, right? So this person might not, actually that's the next thing the moon is really doing. The moon is going to the sextile. That's the next aspect the moon is making. So let's see what he rules. The moon rules, so Jupiter rules what? The 7th and the 9th, or 7th and the 10th, or 7th and the 3rd? Okay, 4th. So the 4th and the 7th, and the 3rd and the 7th. So note that the Jupiter here is fallen. We were just talking about this with Jeffrey Dahmer's chart, because Jupiter is virtue, Jupiter is truth, Jupiter is goodness. Jupiter is about doing the right thing and being a good person and following the rules. In the medieval period, Jupiter isn't spirituality. Jupiter is piety. He's the pious person in the pews who follows the law, follows the edicts of the church, and reaps his reward. Jupiter reaps reward by being virtuous. Virtue is its own reward, is the actual saying. But this Jupiter don't give a fuck about that shit. This Jupiter doesn't necessarily give a fuck about that shit. Now, one of the things I think I remember is that there's a philanthropic aspect to Warren Beatty. There's a wanting to help on the larger scale, but being a complete shit to individuals. So note that there's a mutual reception between the Jupiter is applying to the Saturn. The Mars is applying to the Saturn. The Jupiter is applying to the Saturn. The moon is applying to the Saturn. The Jupiter is applying to the Saturn. The moon is the Eros, is the ruler of the Eros. The Jupiter is the ruler of the 7th. Once again, issues with marriage, right? With this trine, shouldn't there have been marriages? Shouldn't there have been even an early marriage or a stable marriage? Not necessarily. The fallen ruler of the Eros, the fallen ruler of the 7th, applying to the Saturn there. So it's complicated. That's probably what he said all the fucking time. It's complicated. It's complicated. You're special. Bye. So that's Warren Beatty. We can see the distance. We can see the emotional distance. We can see the removal, the sense of removal. The Saturn would do that. The Moon in the Scorpio would do that. We can see the need for the sensuality, right? We can see the attachment to the sensuality, right? Virgo on the ascendant. Virgo is sensual. Aries is licentious. And Sun in Aries, so and in the seventh also. So all of this is a licentious sign. These are licentious signs. This is a licentious sign. I automatically consider the water signs licentious. This is the exaltation of Venus. This person loves sex. This person loves beauty, but from a distance, doesn't want to. Intimacy is the problem in this chart. I don't know. It's not even so much intimacy. I think that this person just is so self-centered, so into the things that they want to do, so into whatever, right? Look at the Mercury and the Sun together. And in Aries, the ruler of the ascendant, the Venus in Taurus on the part of fortune. This person is just so into whatever it is that they're into that other people don't really matter, it feels like. Other people don't really rate, don't really measure up. Maybe there's an issue of using people. This feels like a user's, like just generally with other people, that they might use people. And probably it's not until he got old enough and wasn't able to do the same shit that he then decided to get a wife. All right, so that's our little section on the part. That's our little section on the part of Venus. On the lot of Eros. And I thought I would just kind of move through a bunch of these. Oh, there's also one that I want to, so actually, I want to look at another one. Oh, I'm already there. So Bonatti, in his parts of the 12 houses, he talks about this one lot. And I'm pretty sure that in the introduction, they talk about it too. So there's pars vitae. It's the third one. There's durability. Okay. Ration and sense. Okay. This is it. We have discussed the first, second, and third parts of the first house. It remains for us to discuss the fourth part, which is called the part of the Hyleg or pars Hyleg. Now, we've talked about the Hyleg before when we looked at life expectancy. So we did two parts to death. The first part was life expectancy, and the second part was how we will die, right? That's what we looked at the eighth house for. But when we looked at life expectancy, it was all around finding this thing called the Hyleg in the chart. And there are 5 places that are the hylegical places. They are the sun, the moon, the ascendant, the part of fortune, and the place of the previous new moon or full moon in the chart. So all of those things have in common what? Light. They're places of light. And in most of these particular instances, they are places, in 2 of them, they are places that are representative of the distance between the moon or the relationship between the sun and the moon, right? Part of fortune and the previous conjunction or prevention, which is the full moon, right? The ascendant is where the sun appears, right? Or where we appear. And then sun and moon are both lights. So this has to do with the core, and this is the first thing that we would find. The symbol of life, or the significator of life, is the first thing that we would find when we looked at life expectancy, right? It's the planet that would be connected to it, the planet that would be an aspect to it, that would give us the amount of years. That planet's called the Alcoccident, or that's the Latinized term. So when we're looking at life expectancy, we're looking for Hyleg and Alcoccident. All right, those are, so Hyleg says, yes, there's a life that is going to, that's going to burn here. And Okakadin says it's going to burn for this long. Thus, let's continue. The ancients did not care to say much regarding this part because it is so involved with other things. But none of them are able to exist without it. But this part is able to exist without them. It is these things as matter, it is to these things as matter is to form. Now that is the entire concept of Hyleg, because Hyleg comes from the Greek term hyle, which is essentially matter before it is particular, or matter before it is particularized into a specific form. So coal before it becomes a diamond. So coal is the hyle, diamond is the eidos. So coal is the hyle, diamond is the eidos. So this is what they're talking about here. It can exist without them, but they can't exist without it, because it's essentially the prima materia of the chart, right? Matter. The word matter comes from materia. The ancients would have been able to set forth the doctrine on this if they had so desired, but they set it aside for the reasons stated above. This part is the root of the others, and is taken by day or night from the degree of the conjunction or prevention which preceded the nativity, or the question, or the revolution. Remember, I said it can happen in solar returns, elections, horary, to the degree of the moon, and is then projected from the ascendant. So more than likely, you're thinking, now how the hell do we find that previous conjunction or prevention? So we're going to find it. First of all, I want to look to see whose chart I want to do this with. I mean, we could certainly do it with anybody that we've already been with, but it'd be kind of fun to do it with somebody kind of shitty. And so I'm going to add 2 charts to us. I'm going to add Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm going to add Maciel, the most prolific fundraiser in the history of the modern history of the Roman Catholic Church, and one of the greatest charlatan, pedophile, drug addict. And then we'll also do, I think I've got Pope John Paul II in there. I've got Martin Luther King in there too. So we've got somebody kind of altruistic that we can look for. Okay, so let's go first to Jeffrey Dahmer, because I think when we looked on Thursday, and when I did the original video, which is called Locating the Soul, it's part of the traditional astrology course. We looked first at Ella Fitzgerald, and then we looked at Jeffrey Dahmer. And that was when I was like, oh shit, there is something to this. And so on Thursday, we brought them back, and we really got even deeper into it. We were able to really see even further the extent to which these things were the case. So let's figure out, okay, first of all, how do you figure out if there is if the previous syzygy, because that's what we're talking about, if the previous syzygy is a full moon or a natal moon? So in this chart, 0 degrees of Gemini is where the sun is, or the 1st degree of Gemini. The moon is at 19 degrees, or the 20th degree of Aries. So that means that the moon is within 180 degrees, but she's also moving to the new moon. The moon is moving to the new moon in this chart, right? She's going to go to Taurus, then she's going to go to Gemini, and they're going to be in conjunction, and then they're going to start a whole new monthly cycle. So in this particular chart, we can see that the moon is finishing her cycle. She's going to the new moon, which means we want to look for a previous full moon, right? So the degree that we're going to be looking for, or that we're going to start from, is going to be the degree of the previous full moon. How do we find that? Well, the moon is in a house approximately 2 days, or in a sign for approximately 2 days. Thus, the moon here is at 19 degrees. So let's go ahead and give that 2 days. So that's 2 days. Here's 4 days. Here's 6 days. What we're trying to get to is when we're going to find the moon at 180 degrees away. Now, remember, the sun is at 0 degrees of Gemini. That means it's going to be in Taurus. We know automatically that the full moon is going to happen when the sun is in Taurus, right? And the moon is in Scorpio. It's not going to happen when the moon is in Gemini, right? That doesn't happen until next month. So let's go backwards. 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 14. That's what I would do, right? There's 14 days, and there's a fortnight in each cycle. And so we know that we're really close. Maybe let's go 13, right? Let's go 13 days. So we'll go, so 13 minus 1 will bring it, to 18 degrees of Taurus. So 18 degrees of Taurus is where the sun would be. 18 degrees of Scorpio is where the previous full moon in this chart is. Okay? Everybody with me? And once again, let's go back to what it says that we're looking at. Day or night, we're going from the degree of the conjunction, which is the new moon, or prevention, which is the full moon, which preceded the nativity, to the degree of the moon. All right, and then projected from the ascendant. So we're going to do just that. So what did we get? We got 18 degrees of Scorpio. And the moon is at 19 degrees of Aries. That's 150 degrees plus 1, or 20 degrees. Let's go and say plus 2. So now we do that 150 degrees plus 2 from the 20th degree of Libra. That takes us to, what is it? 20 plus 22 degrees of Pisces. This person, so in this particular case, 22 degrees of Pisces is the part of Hyleg. So what did he say about it? All of the other things depend on it, but it does not depend on them, right? It does not depend on them. It is the material from which everything else comes. So what I find fascinating, I was talking about the Jupiter in Capricorn, wasn't I? Note that it's in Capricorn and it's retrograde. This is as impeded as this Jupiter can get. And look, it's separating from the square of Mars, right? This is as impeded as the Jupiter, and it's in the same sign with Saturn. This is as impeded as, I mean, the only thing that could make it worse is if the Saturn were at 3 or we're at 1. Right? If the Saturn were at 1 so that the Jupiter were actually applying to the Saturn. Right? But in this particular case, this Jupiter is not in any condition to be benevolent. Right? But what's interesting about Jeffrey Dahmer is that there was this delusion of altruism in what he was doing. When he would talk about why he did what he did, it was because he loved them so much and wanted to keep them with him. He put them under, like he killed them by drugging them to death, or he would drug them and then kill them. And so he would do that to be more merciful. So there was this very, very, shall we say, warped concept of mercy. There was this warped concept of benevolence and care that was involved in this chart. And it's so fascinating to me notice that Jupiter is the ruler of the 7th from the part of fortune, right? 7th is love, relationships, and marriage, right? Mars is the actual ruler of the 7th house. And Mars is in Aries with that moon right there, right? everything was about the beloved. He kept them there in order. He killed them in order to keep them close. He kept parts of their body in different in the refrigerator in order to keep mementos of them. There was a sentimentality to to everything that he was doing. That sentimentality is Jupiterian. So there's a perversion of the sentiment. There's a perversion of the mercy, of the concept of mercy, or of the quality of mercy. Right? What is it Shakespeare says? The quality of mercy is not strained, or something like that. So the quality of mercy here is perverted. And note that Jupiter is in the exaltation of Mars, who he just left. Right? The Mercury is moving to the Mars. Mercury is the ruler of the part of fortune. Oh, let's figure out who the spirit is in this chart. let's figure out who the Eros is in this chart, shall we? Because I mean, good God, this is all about what the Eros led to, right? So let's get into all of it. So we've just looked at the part of Hyleg. I did not ignore the fact that the south node is on the part of Hyleg. I noted it, but didn't say anything. So I noted that K2 was there. And remember, K2 is headlessness. K2 is the tail of the dragon. So where K2 is, there's a headlessness. And there's a detachment. There's an inability to attach. There's a disillusionment that we either continue to go back to and it continues to disillusion us, or we walk away from. K2 wants us to walk away. This is very interesting. Okay, so let's look at the spirit. So the fortune, we see the Pluto on the fortune. Ooh, got a question. What was the precise degree of the part of Hyleg again? It was, good question. It was 22 degrees of Pisces, right on the K2. You're welcome. Okay, so if you've been watching my videos, which I know Stephanie has, then she probably knows I've been using the part of fortune as an alternate ascendant, so we can think of Mercury as another ascendant in this chart. And that means that Mercury being in the 8th house of this chart, that means that the 7th house becomes the 8th house of the part of fortune chart, where the Mars and the Moon are. Right? So we've got all this 7th, 8th stuff, and noted that the Venus is the ruler of the 8th, and I've talked about this perversion of the love aspect that's in there as well. So let's get into it. Okay. So we know that the moon is moving towards the sun, so there's not much distance, 20th degree of Aries to the 1st degree of Gemini. It's daytime, so we'd move back. We could go back 60 if we wanted to the 1st degree of Aries and move back forward 18. Right, which would bring us to 19 degrees, right? So we could do it that way. Or, which is what happened here, right? So we went back 30, we went back 60, and then we went forward 18. So we go back 30, we go back 60 to 20 degrees of Libra, and then we go forward 18 to the 8th degree or the 9th degree of Virgo. All right, so now we would do the opposite. We'd go from the moon, so we go forward 30, forward 60, minus 18, or minus 19. So forward 30, forward 60, minus 19. So that's going to take us into the 1st degree of Sagittarius. So Jupiter is the ruler of the spirit in this chart. So Jupiter is the ruler of the Hyleg, so it'd be the 1st degree of Sagittarius would be the spirit. So Jupiter rules the Hyleg and the spirit in this chart. So that's really interesting to me, because remember, Jupiter rules in the 8th house from the part of the 8th, well, the 7th from the part of fortune, right? And the 6th, the natural 6th, and the Mars is kind of in the 6th if we want to see it, but also that's where the Pars Hyleg is. So the Pars Hyleg is in the 6th house. That's important. The Pars Hyleg is in the 6th house because the 6th house is the house of infirmity. So could that be saying that there's something wrong on the root level? Another term they use is Pars Radix. Radix, which would imply root. So would that maybe, so with that, and also with the K2 on it too, would that already start to, the sixth house would already say, maybe illness, right? Already, if I saw something important, like if I saw the part of fortune in the sixth, I'd say, is there illness? Or is there work with animals? Or are they a servant? Right? So maybe Pars Hyleg says the root, there's something wrong at the root, right? Bad fortune, bad juju at the root. Then also the K2 on top of it, the tail of the dragon, right? The dragon's a demon, right? The dragon's a demon that sucks out the nectar of immortality and gets cut in half. So could that be something kind of saying that? And then, of course, Jupiter is the ruler of the sixth. What is inimical to life, right? Because the ruler of the sixth, the traditional rulership of the sixth is enemies, enmity, but also infirmity, and still got that in or en prefix, right? So infirmity, enmity, both were connected, but infirmity stuck. And so Jupiter is what's infirm in this chart. Jupiter is what's infirm. I think the part of Mars at 19 Pisces. Ooh, interesting. You're already gotten ahead of me. But that would put Mars on the part of Mars. That would put the moon, is obviously conjuncting it. But if we looked at it from a whole sign standpoint, the Mars is on the part of Mars. So, and remember what it's called. It's called the part of valor. The part of valor, the part of courage. Now, is a serial killer, here's a good question. And I want you to write your answer in the chat. Is a serial killer courageous? Are they a coward at heart? Or are they brave at heart? Is it an act of bravery, or is it an act of cowardice? How would you define serial killer? Coward at heart. How about this? It's obviously an expression of cowardice, but comes from a delusion of bravery. The serial killer has to cross the taboo, right? The taboo is not just a subject, it's a territory. So and we can see we can see it happening. The ruler of the ascendant and the ruler of the part of fortune are both interested in crossing into the taboo territory. The next aspect that the ruler of the fortune that Mercury is making is to Mars, who's the ruler of the seventh of others, but Mars is already contention and sharp objects. Aries is already the violent aspect of Mars, the rushing forward aspect of Mars. So there has to be within the serial killer an overcoming of fear of the taboo. It's not a fear, right? It's the fact that they're acting in a cowardly fashion and killing, like, many serial killers kill people who have no ability to defend themselves. They kill children, they kill, it doesn't even matter if they do, right? Usually it's stealth, there's a stealth aspect to it. There's a surprise element to the victim, not for the serial killer, mind you, right? All of those things. So there is so much surreptitious activity which reeks of cowardice, right? It can't see the light of day. The actions that we're doing can't really see the light of day. Look at the Mercury rules the 12th house, and it's in the 8th. And the Jupiter and Saturn would be in the natural 4th. Those are all what I call the houses of the hidden, of the unseen. I don't call them the water houses. Because the 4th house is the house of secrets. The 8th house is the house of where we go into the underworld. The 12th house is the house of prisons and what doesn't see the light of day. So we see that the Mercury is part of fortune and also the ruler of the 12th. We see that he's in the 8th house of the taboo. We see that the ruler of the ascendant is just about to cross into it and go down into it. So that's what I think the courage is about, in my opinion. the courage for that person. Note that the 8th house from the part of Mars is Scorpio. That's the taboo from Mars. That's Mars's taboo. And so that's where that's where the serial killer must show courage, is in crossing over into that unsavory territory. But everything else, how it manifests in the world, everything else about it is cowardice. So let's look at Eros. So we've looked at Hyleg. You brought us to the Mars. Did you do the Eros too, Stephanie, by any chance, or not yet? 22 Pisces, right? Was the spirit. Not yet. Great. All right. So once again, the spirit was moon to sun, right? Yeah, moon to sun. And that was at 1 degree of Sag. That's right. So 1 Sag, it's daytime. So 8 Virgo, we're going from Fortune to Sagittarius. 1 Sag for spirit. 11 Aries. Let's see. I think you might be right. I think it's the other way. It should be a square. It should be Capricorn. So it's because it's Virgo to Sagittarius. It's daytime. Pisces, it's a part of fortune, the part of spirit. So it's 90 minus 7. Forward 90, Capricorn, 20 minus 7, 13 degrees of Capricorn would be the, and note, there is that Jupiter. 13 degrees of Capricorn would be the Eros. And Saturn, remember what I just said about Saturn a few minutes ago? Saturn is the significator for death. Note also that Saturn is the ruler of the 5th house. Remember, we were just talking about what kind of stroke gets this person off. So Saturn is the death stroke. And it's all Saturn. It's not Mars and Saturn. It's all Saturn. Saturn rules the 4th and the 5th in this chart. Saturn rules the 4th house of secrets and the 5th house of what I enjoy. Now, if you've been doing my lessons, then you've probably seen me break things up into triplicity rulers. So, there's for air, Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter are the triplicity rulers. For the 5th house, the first triplicity ruler is Saturn, is children. The second triplicity ruler, Mercury, is sensual pleasures and delights. This Mercury-Mars sextile, this choleric Mercury, because look, Mercury is leaving is moving out of combustion. Sun is cholera, hot and dry is cholera. Sun is hot and dry, and it's moving to the sextile of Mars in a hot and dry sign. So all this cholera. So this is a very choleric, hot-headed, hot, dry Mars. Hot, dry Mercury, rather. Right. So even though it's in a hot and wet sign, it's dried out by both the sun and Mars. And Mars in his aggressive sign, in his most aggressive sign as well, in his hot and dry sign, fire. All the fire signs are hot and dry, all the cholera. And then the Mars separating from the square of the Jupiter, cold and dry. Capricorn is cold and dry. Saturn is cold and dry. So there's a lot of dryness in this chart. Dryness dries up water. The water is the water of the spirit and the emotions, right? So this kind of same thing that we're talking about. There's this dryness. There's dry cholera with the moon and the Mercury, which is the soul of the person, right? So there's the ability to lose their head, which is already there with the part of the Hyleg, right? The ability to lose their head and fly into a rage or fly into a murderous rage, right? Then there's this coldness, this detachment, this coldness. And all of it is dry as fuck. Venus is in Taurus, which is cold and dry. Virgo, cold and dry. So we've got hot and wet, but sun is drying up the Mercury. Moon is dried up by Aries, hot and dry. Mars is in his hot and dry sign. He's a hot and dry planet. Cold and dry Capricorn, Saturn and cold and dry. So Jupiter getting cold, getting chilled. Jupiter's a hot, wet planet, but he's getting chilled. Venus is a hot, wet planet, but she's getting dried out and chilled down. So all of that stuff is affecting this chart, this person. So it's interesting how so much points back to this Jupiter. And so much points back to this Jupiter, which I was really maybe expecting it to really point back to the Mars. Now, how did you get 11 Aries? Oh, I know what you did. You did the fortune to the Hyleg, to the Pars Hyleg, Stephanie. That's how you got it. Because I'm like, where did you get that part? 11 Aries thing. But that makes more sense. But yeah, the spirit, because I don't have a mark for it. The spirit was 1 degree of Sag, so it gave us 90 degrees forward -8, which gave us 11 degrees, or 11 degrees or 7 to 12 degrees of Capricorn, putting us there, putting the Eros there. So the Saturn Jupiter there really making everything. So very, very interesting looking at that chart. Let's look at Martin Luther King. Let's look at something uplifting. So part of fortune is in the third. What I think is interesting about that is that the third house is the 12th from the fourth. And so the thing that Martin Luther King did was he battled the demon of a country. He battled the country's hidden enemy, which is racism. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. That's a bit of a stretch, but I like to use it anyway. All right, so part of fortune in the third house. Now, people might say third house in communication, but one of the things he did was he traveled all over the country. Remember, they had the Southern what was it? The Southern Christian Leadership Convention had buses, and they went all over the South. They went to Selma, Alabama. They went to Montgomery. They went to Mississippi. They went to Memphis. He died in Memphis, Tennessee. So he was traveling all over all of the time. So we've already got kind of that kind of situation happening. Then we've got the moon as the ruler of that. We've got the moon as the ruler of it. And we know that the third house is called goddess. I think that's really interesting. So we've got the part of fortune is in goddess, but and we know also that he was something of a womanizer himself, or he had very, very strong appetites, loved beautiful women, loved good food, very strong appetites, period. And we can see both of the planets of appetite are together, and Venus is exalted. The planet of desire is exalted. This is not a similar type like Warren Beatty. This is coming from true appreciation and inability to control their impulses. And would be kind of where that would be coming from, in my opinion. All right, let's now look to see some of the other things. So this is a B graded chart. So we'd want to see, so we're going to take this one with a kind of a grain of salt. I like it. I like this chart, but know that this might not be correct. And so maybe if we see things that don't make sense, it's because the chart's not correct. So let's see, let's find the spirit. So let's see, moon is at 19 Pisces or 20 Pisces, 25 sun is at 25 Capricorn. It is daytime. And so we're going to go back 60 and forward 5 or 20, forward 6. So back 60 to Pisces and forward 6 to 20 degrees of Pisces, right on the moon. Now, if there's anything about Martin Luther King, there is this idea of universal love, this idea of universal love, the brotherhood of man, being judged not by the skin, by the color of one's skin, but by the content of one's character. That's all Pisces taught. Content of character is Pisces. Moon is really content of character, period. But the fact that you should not be judged based on what you look like, but based on what's inside that cannot be seen, that's Pisces. That's moon and Pisces. This person's spirit, that this person's spirit was in how could we create more of a sense of unity, right? Martin Luther King was not a militant anti-white person. His vision was white children and black children together. He even says it in his things, with white children and black children holding hands together, everybody together, everybody being equal. Note that the Mercury is in Aquarius also, right? This Mercury would be the speech, right? The tongue, right? Note that the Saturn is in Sagittarius, ruler of Aquarius, right? Sagittarius would give us that brotherhood of man over all cultures. And they went to India to study Satyagraha from the disciples of Gandhi before they started all of the civil rights things. In the United States, they used Satyagraha as their actual foundation of the nonviolent protest. Let's see what else. So now we know the spirit, and of course Pisces is pacifistic. Pisces is nonviolent. Venus and Pisces make love, not war, right? Okay, so now let's look to see, what do we want to see first, Eros or Hyleg? Let's look for Hyleg in this chart. Now, we're not looking for the Hyleg, we're looking for the part of Hyleg. The Hyleg is a different thing, once again. All right, so we're going to find the previous new or full moon. Now, we can see from this chart that the moon is just leaving the new, right? Capricorn is where the sun is. Aquarius is after that. Pisces is after that. So the moon has just left it. Has just left the conjunction. So the moon is actually in its waxing phase. And it's probably in, let's see, it's not quite 30 degrees. So it's probably in the second or third day. So let's do 3 days back, which brings us to 22 degrees or 23 degrees of Capricorn, right? Because anything that we're moving per day, the sun is going to move back the amount of degrees. So if we move the moon back 3 days, we're moving the sun back 3 degrees. That's what we did in the previous chart. We moved the moon back 13 days, and we moved the sun back 13 degrees. In this chart, we're going to move back 3 days and move the sun back 3 degrees to 23 degrees, to the 23rd degree of Capricorn. So now, by night or day, we take the 23rd degree of Capricorn to the 20th degree of Pisces, and we project that. So that's 60 minus 3, which brings us very close to the part of fortune, 10 degrees or 11 degrees of Cancer. Once again, bringing us to this conjunction. It's separating. It's separating, but they're both together. So this moon Venus is really giving us everything. And note it's also in the 11th house of future hopes and wishes, the vision, the dream of this person. The moon and the moon is everything, right? The moon is the co-ruler of all things. When we talked about the moon's role in the natal chart, we talked about how we bring the moon into every house with us, which means that however she's functioning affects everything that we do, right? So he's bringing this moon Venus into the house, and actually, look, he's bringing this moon Mars, Venus, moon, Mars, Saturn. Right, so she's leaving the Venus, and she's moving to the Mars. The next thing she's going to do is square the Mars. So now would be a great time to look for the part of Mars, because this chart needed courage. So let's go see what that is. I'm sure you're probably working on it now, but let's see what that is. So what did we say the Hyleg was? It was Cancer, 11 degrees of Cancer, the part of Hyleg. Now the part of Mars is fortune, Mars to fortune by day and the reverse by night. Okay, Mars to fortune, it's daytime. Mars to fortune, 30 minus 13. Let me see. 30 minus 13, 38. Okay, so it's 10 minutes. 30, 0. So the first degree of Gemini, that's the Mars. No, look at that. The Mercury right up there. The Mercury right up there. And what did he really kind of get the most ire for? His eloquence, for the kind of shit he said. You know, when we learn about Martin Luther King, we learn about the I Have a Dream speech and all of the civil rights related stuff. But what we forget is that after he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, he moved on from racism and segregation, and started attacking poverty and the Vietnamese War. 66, he started attacking in earnest, starting attacking the Vietnamese War, and started attacking the structures that upheld systemic poverty. That stuff lost him almost all of the fans that he got. So ultimately, this is a person who, shall we say, courted controversy, it's Mercury trine the Mars, courted controversy, but also courted, what shall we say, courted ire based on their speech, but didn't stop talking and didn't stop saying what they believed in. When he was murdered, when he was assassinated, he was actually at a strike for sanitation workers in Memphis. He had this whole thing called, what was it called? The Poor People's Campaign or something like that. And he was being vilified. He was being vilified for it. And so both this Aquarius and Pisces are interested often in the underdog, but Pisces especially, right? Pisces is interested in the underdog. So he moved from one underdog to the next. The part of Hyleg is this moon. The part of spirit, what did we say was the part of spirit? It was back 60. Oh, the part of spirit is the Jupiter. So the Jupiter rules the part of spirit. Oh, and the part of spirit was on all this Venus moon stuff. And note that Venus and Jupiter are mutually reception, are in this mutual reception here. So it's all about peace and love and unity and how we can, and brotherhood and just, it's all about that, and virtue, how we can create this society of virtue together through peace and love, and valuing each other, raising up those that are vulnerable, and raising up the poor, raising up the vulnerable, bringing equity. The speech is always about equity, is always about what our responsibility to the collective is. And it attracts the ire. It attracts anger. Note that the Mars is in Gemini, but retrograde. The moon is, that's right, it was the moon is applying to the square of the Mars, right? The moon's the ruler of the fortune and the Hyleg. So this is the root of the person, and this is the root of who the person is, and the path of their fortune, their path to fortune as well. What do you think so far, Stephanie, with this part of Hyleg thing? I mean, we've only looked at 2 charts. Ooh, Jaja. Let's see who else. This is a chart I haven't looked at previously. Yeah, Jerry Garcia. So, I was born in the late 60s and started university in the early 80s. My first year in college was 1983. And I was raised in I was raised in an environment where I was one of the only Black people for most of my upbringing. For almost, matter of fact, for most of my life, I've lived almost completely in what I would call white spaces. My parents and I were the first Black family in 1970 in our suburb, and then and never really lived. Yeah, interesting so far. I don't have an opinion yet either, partially because, like I said, it is really new to me too. It's different than Hyleg, than the Hyleg itself, but it's pointing to something that is but the way I'm looking at it is as a possible pointing to something that is the root of where everything else comes from. Right. And so we saw that Jupiter in Capricorn retrograde for Jeffrey Dahmer. That's the root from which everything, that's the spoiled root of the rotten tree. But then we see the moon in Pisces with Venus and about to square the Mars. And that's a different thing altogether. That's peace and love in the face of wrath. Right. So I think if we kind of start looking at it in these ways, maybe that it will start to bring some light. We're gonna look at all of them. So Jerry Garcia is probably, this is the chart. This would be like a chart of Keith Richard. This is the chart of a rock and roller. He's the main person of the Grateful Dead. And as I was saying, when I started school, I started meeting all of these people who were deadheads. And the Grateful Dead were still huge. They weren't like, they didn't have hits, but they were this huge cult following. It was more than, it was, I mean, when we say cult following, I really mean cult following. People dressed a certain way. They attracted to this very specific kind of hippie demographic, kind of hippie white trash demographic, if I may say. Very specific drug use demographic, and which means everything under the sun, but especially hallucinogenics. Because this is a group that came of age in the psychedelic age in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury, and all of that kind of shit. Right. And I lived in San Francisco for 18 years. So it attracts kind of the hippy dippy with the patchouli oil and the ugly the dreads with the big fat, gross, all grown together kind of shit. A lot of homeless and street urchins. So lots of drug use, and not just the hallucinogenics, lots of crystal, lots of heroin. And Jerry did all of that shit. And yeah, so and like I said, hippie gestalt. It's like this hippie cult gestalt. And he is the king of this cult. He is the head of this cult. And he is one of the most dissipated human beings on the planet. He died many years ago, but he was literally, I mean, at the time of death, he was still hard partying to the same extent. Like, people had no idea how he could keep it up. Note that the K2 is in the fifth there. How did Jerry Garcia keep it up? He was fucked up all the time, partying, drugging, partying, groupies, culties, cult heads, deadheads, all the time. All right, so let's look at it. First of all, note that the part of fortune is in the 9th house in Gemini. Now, the 9th house was traditionally the house of kings. It was the house of kingship, because the 3rd was called queen and the 9th was called king. Note that the sun's in Leo and that the sun's with Mercury. Note that the Jupiter is exalted on the cusp of the 10th. That's what we think of for kingship and kingdom now, is the 10th house. Jupiter with Venus. Now, those of you who've been studying with me know that I always call that too much of a good thing. Too much of a good thing, I call that. Note that the ruler of the 5th house is on the part of fortune. Saturn is the ruler of the 5th. So just those few Sun, ruler of the 11th, on the cusp of not on the cusp of the 11th, but in the 10th, with the Mercury. Venus, the ruler of the ascendant, with exalted Jupiter. Ruler of the part of fortune with the ruler of the 11th in his own sign. So already we can see the glory that this person would experience. But Saturn on the 5th, Saturn as ruler of the 5th, but Saturn on the part of fortune also, in my opinion, gives us an idea of the kingdom. Because Saturn is paupers and beggars, people who are dirty, low lifes, people who are at the low end of the social spectrum. So I think that's really fascinating because everything else kind of says, ooh, exalted life. Wow, the ruler of the ascendant with the exalted Jupiter, the ruler of the part of fortune with the part of the ruler of the 11th in his own sign. That says exalted life. It's daytime. Let's go back 5. Yeah, I mean, this is an exalted life, but why isn't it an exalted life with exalted personages? Right? This isn't a life. Often when you see people that go high in life, you see people that once they go high in life, they deal with other people who are in that strata. Not so much with Jerry Garcia that I know of. Jerry Garcia surrounded himself but with his groupies. You know, he didn't become friends with Aaron Copland or with Leonard Bernstein or whatever, like Paul McCartney did. Right? He didn't hobnob with, you know, he hobnobbed with other Grateful Dead people, other hard partiers, and his groupies. So we'll be looking for that. Anyway, let's find the part of spirit. So part of fortune we've already found, and moon is at 13th degree or 14th of Aries. Sun is in the 9th degree of Leo, which means it's nighttime. It's daytime. So we've already found that. So now let's look for nighttime. So that would bring us forward 120 degrees and back 5. So forward 120 degrees is the 20th degree of Aquarius, and back 5 is the 15th degree of Aquarius. This is the second time we've found something at 15 degrees of Aquarius. All right, so 15 Aquarius is the spirit. So that puts the ruler of the part of spirit on the fortune, which is auspicious, which Vettius Valens would say is very auspicious. And once again, if indeed Saturn is the ruler of the 5th, then this person may have enjoyed things that aren't very exalted. Right? Saturn is not what is exalted. The sun is exalted. The sun exalts things. Jupiter exalts things. Venus can exalt things. Saturn doesn't often exalt things. Saturn is what's lowly. So it's already the ruler of the 5th. It's now also the ruler of the spirit. So the spirit is all about connectivity, right? Social connectivity, remembering that Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces are the signs with wings, right? So this is the social butterfly sign. So this spirit wants to be involved in social activity, and Saturn doesn't need it to be on a very high level. It doesn't need to be high. It doesn't need to be kings and queens. It doesn't need to be nobility. It can be the common people is the moon, generally. Another moon in Aries. Common people is usually often the moon. And note that the moon is leaving the sextile of the Saturn. And the 7th house. So the 7th house and the moon both represent the common people. Note that the moon's in the 7th. Right? So, but that which is common is also Saturn. Right? Or that which is lowly. Really, I remember working at the Greek theater, the Greek amphitheater, the Greek theater, or something like that in Berkeley. And this was later. This is when one of his many appendages, Phil Lesh, was playing. And they all attract the same people. And Phil Lesh did a concert where literally he jammed on one chord for an hour and a half. Motherfucker, because I'm also a musician and I'm the one slinging hash and he's the one jamming on one chord. Anyway, but it was all the same kind of people. And at the end of the evening, I can't tell you how many people came and asked us if we had any extra food, any extra money, any extra food, any extra drinks, anything that we could give them. And a lot of people were straight up street urchins, straight up like probably, panhandled the money to get to this concert, and they were going to panhandle their way back, or whatever they were going to do to get back, and maybe they were going to get some food on the way, and they were probably squatting in some place, living 10 or 12 people squatting in some place. That's the kind of people, the kind of cult that Jerry Garcia kind of attracted. And that's all ruled by Saturn. So the dregs, what would be considered the dregs. So now let's look at the Hyleg. Let's find the Hyleg. So that means that we need to find the previous full moon or new moon. So the moon is about to go to new, right? She's finished. She would have been full in Aquarius. So she's about to go to new. So that means we're looking for the previous full moon, sorry. So this is 1 day. This is 2 days. This is 5 days. So 5 days. We're going to go back 5 to 3 degrees of Aquarius. Okay, or 4 degrees of Aquarius. 4 degrees of Aquarius is the previous full moon in this chart. So now we take that to 13 degrees of Aries. So that's 60 plus 9. So 20 plus 9 is 29 degrees of Sagittarius. So the part of Hyleg is Jupiter. That makes sense. So there's this magnanimity. There's this, Jupiter and in my opinion, Jupiter and Cancer are both connected to Jupiter and Moon rather are both connected to Cancer, because remember that the Moon is in her joy in the 3rd. The Moon rules welcome. The Moon and Jupiter rule welcome and patronage, or or having somebody that, or having a patron that brings you in, right? The Moon, the mother is your mother is your first patron into life, right? She's the first one. Think about how scary it is in kindergarten or nursery school. The first time we're going to be away from mother in a situation, right? Jupiter is the same feeling on a larger situation. Think about the first time an opera singer does their debut when the teacher isn't there, right? Jupiter's other name is Guru, his Sanskrit name, right? Guru is the teacher. So it's there's a similar kind of largesse extended, a similar kind of care, a similar kind of fellowship that Jupiter and Moon both are supposed to extend. And Jupiter and Cancer exalted would really have the ability to do that. And with Venus, it would be, hey, come in. You want something that makes you feel good? Right? Because Venus is about what makes us feel good. And she's the ruler of the ascendant in this chart. This is another person who spent a lot of time on the road. Jupiter rules the 3rd house. And this is a person who dealt with a lot of illnesses as a result of their addictions. And Jupiter is the ruler of the 6th as well. So once again, we've got this issue with changeability, going from place to place. Both the 3rd and the 6th house have to do with moving from house to house, going from place to place. This changeability. And then also the 6th house, so the illness. And then Venus, Jupiter, like I said, is already too much of a good thing. Interesting how many of these planets have had Jupiter or had Venus in connection, or where Jupiter has been the Hyleg, the root of the Hyleg, or the part of the Hyleg, the lord of the part. So there's this magnanimity. I mean, people who never met him, oh, Jerry, right? I mean, sure, it's different. This is different because at this point, think in the 80s, by the 80s, essentially the Grateful Dead was like a cover band covering their own hits. You know what I'm saying? They were a zombie band. They were no longer famous. They were no longer hitting the charts. They were no longer relevant, really, musically. They were no longer really relevant, but they sold out every fucking venue. And I remember going to a Grateful Dead concert and not even going to the concert, just staying outside the parking lot. That was the best part. Because you saw these fucking crazy ass people. You could get any kind of fucking drugs you wanted. Outrageous shit would go down in the parking lot. to the Jerry Garcia or the Grateful Dead concert. So that's my point. I mean, sure, it's one thing to throw your panties on the stage for, I don't know who's really popular right now, for John Legend, I guess, or I don't know, or for Justin Timberlake, or for what's his name, Justin Bieber. But it's another thing to be throwing your panties on the thing for a ghost band of alive, band members who are alive but who haven't had a hit in 10 years and who nobody gives a fuck about but their own people. So that's another aspect. So now what else would we look at? I'm not really so interested in the Eros in this chart. I thought I was just more interested in the Hyleg, but we can look at it. So we know that, what did we say? The part of spirit was, oh, that's right. It was at what, 1 degree of Capricorn or something like that? Or Aquarius, 15 Aquarius. That's right. 15 Aquarius. And so it's daytime. So 13 Aries to 15 Aquarius. That's 300 degrees plus 2. 300 degrees brings us to 20 degrees of Leo, plus 2 is 22 degrees of Leo. That's the Eros of this chart. So the Eros of this Venus is really self-promotion, really putting forward the self. Because Jerry Garcia isn't really known as a great musician. He's known as the king of this cult. It's a music cult. It's a drug cult. It's a hippie music drug cult. And he's not, I mean, sure, he's a musician, but he's not, but I don't even know what he plays. I mean, I don't even know if if he's just the main singer, or if he actually plays guitar or some kind of instrument. I mean, I could obviously look him up. I don't really give a fuck enough, but this is such a fascinating life, in my opinion. This is a person who's had such a fascinating, charmed fucking life. And I just find that really this so interesting. Also, that this Eros is in Leo, so the sun's in it. So this person is just all about kind of pushing this persona of them, their own personal persona, taking on a spiritual persona, like moving their persona into, right? Because sun is God. People are worshiping Jerry Garcia. People are praying to him. Note that the Mercury is, that the part of fortune is in the 9th, and the Mercury is with him, with the sun. Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. I'm going to look at one more chart and then we're going to stop, and you can ask questions. If you have any questions now, feel free. And if you have no questions, after I stop the tape, you can ask whatever you want. Oh, Bernie Madoff. Except I don't remember where I saw that part of Thieves. Could Mars in the 12th? Could Mars in the 12th conjunct Rahu and ruler of the moon in 7th also be him dealing with others who may be involved in drugs, could cause trouble, or who may be less fortunate? I like that. Let's see. Okay, so could the Mars, okay, so Mars is in the 11th. Now he belongs to the 12th, right? So there's an 11-12 thing. But so the 12th, if Mars were really in the 12th in this chart, I would maybe say yes. I do think, and that's no problem. I think that is one layer of it, right? So one layer of it is the whole sign layer. This other layer of it, what Mars, like you said, rules the 7th, which is the public. Mars also rules what? The 2nd, which would be his money. Mars is ruled by the Mercury sun. So what that actually says to me is whatever kind of thing is being pushed forward, whatever is being pushed forward on his path of fortune is bringing money and a connection with the regular people, right? With the common people. The Mars Rahu, I think Rahu tends to give unusual behavior or behavior that's unconventional. And Mars is already action. And so Mars Rahu, I think, might be really talking about his actions, right? That this is somebody who was unabashedly unconventional, who unabashedly did not follow rules, who unabashedly did not do things the way other people did, who did not value the same things other people value, who did not want the company of people that other people want. Right? There's Mars as ruler of the seventh, and who the company I keep, who I want to be with. And in the 11th of which is also social, right? Of friends, right? The 11th house is I'm not going to call it groups. It's the house of friends. So Mars is there in the house of friends. And so this is the kind of friends, and then Mars is the ruler of the seventh of the common man. Mars is with Rahu, which is unconventional and weird and strange. And maybe criminal. In Vedic astrology, Rahu represents criminals and politicians, the underground, basically the mafia, and things of that nature. So all of that is a descriptor of the friendships of the people that this person wants to connect with. In my opinion. So I think yes. I think yes. So in that respect, then yes, but not as an expression of the 12th, but as an expression of the 11th of friends. Because the Mercury is the ruler of the 12th. And once again, look how the Mercury is with the ruler of the 11th. So the ruler of the 12th, and that means that the Mercury is the ruler of the part of fortune and the 12th. So that means that the self-undoing is also what they experience as they take on their path to fortune and to the realization of their wishes. So with the realization of their dreams and wishes comes also this difficulty with whatever they're self-undoing. The Mercury is working as self-undoing. You're welcome. Because if we were looking for other people's misfortune, we would be, although this works too, we would be looking at the 12th, right, which is the 6th from the 7th, and the 12th from the 7th. So we'd be looking really at Mercury and Jupiter. Or friends' misfortunes, we would be looking at the 10th house and the 4th house, right? The 12th and the 6th. And that would be our Saturn and Moon. And we already see that Saturn is on the part of fortune, misfortunes of our friends. Or that we have friends who are unfortunate, or the misfortune, or that we collect what we wait. And what do they collect? What does this person collect? This person collects Mars, and Mars is in the house of friends, in Virgo. So Mars. So this person collects weird, strange people who might do all kinds of unsavory things without limits. And the Jupiter Venus is all about giving everyone permission to do excess, permission to the excess. Never too much of a good thing. I bet he even said that. I bet if we go back, that's a motto of his. Never too much of a good thing. Which of course there is, which is why he was sick all the time in his later life. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop with Jerry Garcia. It's interesting. It's easy to kind of go chart to chart when it's something that you can see easily. When it's something that you have to kind of glean, and like we're looking at now, it tires me out a little bit. Like kind of looking the way that we've been looking is kind of, I look at all the charts that I listed, but I didn't really decide to do. You know, I just decided to use. I was going to look at Aurangzeb or Chhatrapati Shivaji. They were arch enemies, and they were both warriors. And I was going to look at that for their Mars. Also, Errol Flynn, who did all of his own. He was one of the first actors to do all of his own all of his own stunts. He did Robin Hood and all of these different pirate movies and very daring stunts for that time period. And so I thought that would be interesting to look at. And then, of course, for Jupiter, I was looking at George Bush and also for Pope John and just all of that other stuff. But this is something we can come back to another time. So I'm going to stop the recording here, and then you can feel free to ask whatever questions you have.